How would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 68-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Edit: most driving laws are passed by state legislators, who usually do drive themselves. Here in Illinois, my grandpa had to do it every year after 75. Ugh, please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed, but the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the road still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving. Old retired guy here. 74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases. Dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm all for retesting people, however, I'm not sure what you mean by specialized. The requirements for good driving don't change with age, so it should be the same test. Can we make everyone take it? Seriously, I see more horrible drivers in the commuting age bracket than in the retired age bracket. Ideally, we'd all be retested every 10 years or so until we hit 60, then we're retested every 5 years. However, older folks are a huge voting bloc and it's unlikely this would ever pass. I'd be okay with it if over 70 drivers are statistically more likely to get into accidents. Asterisk, let me say this about that asterisk: the neighbor I love is 93 and still driving, when she's up to it. She can barely see the on-off switch on her vacuum cleaner. Should she be driving? I want her to maintain independence, but at the same time, I don't think it's safe for her or others. Yet the DMV doesn't require her to take a vision exam or a competency test. I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. All for it. When I was 14, my friend was coming to my house and he got killed by my next-door neighbor who happened to be elderly. My friend was on his skateboard and he was just up the street from my house. From the position of his body and where elderly guy stopped his car, I could see he made a super sharp left turn that killed him and ran over my other friend. The other friend survived and recovered from his injuries. But my other friend not so lucky. Oh, and my granddad has Alzheimer's and frequently forgets where he is, and I think he still has his license, though my grandma finally took his keys. Ontario has testing every 2 years for 80 plus. 70 is a bit young for that, honestly. Edit: I'm surprised at how vehemently everyone disagrees with me that 70 is a bit young. It may be true that I just happen to know a lot of abnormally strong and healthy older people, but most of the 70 plus I know in no way fit the sickly, doddering image I think a lot of us have of the elderly. Just like the majority of 20 and under don't fit the irresponsible, reckless image a lot of people have of kids. According to these, admittedly old, stats, the vast majority of traffic fatalities are caused by younger people. A better solution is to test everyone every few years, and have stricter medical conditions, for everyone. We need statistics to show us which demographics cause the most accidents over distance driven. If the over 70 leads in this, then yes. My fiancé's brother was killed riding his motorcycle Sunday by a 91-year-old who pulled out in front of him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. He was one of the best guys I ever met. We are all devastated and it could have been prevented. That man had no business behind the wheel. As an insurance professional, just because you have been doing something for a long time, does not mean you are good at it. Drivers should be tested every 5 years, not just once you hit a certain age. People should have to retake the driver's test every 10 years if not 20. I've seen too many terrible drivers of all ages. By the time the law was passed, self-driving cars will be available. I'm an iDoc and I'd be all for it. You know how often I get berated or threatened by geriatrics when I strongly suggest that they quit driving because they no longer meet the legal requirements for driving? I'd be all for it if we can compensate them by providing transportation to those who can no longer drive for low cost. Self-driving cars may soon fit this position. I'm for it. The inability for old people to drive would result in them voting en masse for public transportation improvements. My grandma rear-ended a line of stopped cars on the highway at full speed, no brakes, with my 5-year-old brother in the car because she thought she saw a deer on the side of the road. She's been in another, less serious wreck, and has come to a dead stop while on the highway because she forgot where she was going multiple times since then. My dad had to unplug her battery and tell her that her car doesn't work anymore so she would start asking for rides. I would love if they took age into account in some way. I'm not an expert on anything so I don't know how they would do it, so that families wouldn't have to be torn between treating their elders like a child or worrying if they're going to get a call from the hospital anytime they're behind the wheel. It's hard enough to book a driving test these days. It takes a good 4 months in the UK. This would worsen the situation. IMO driving tests in the US need to be more difficult and have the driver face most every scenario with at least 2 versions of each. In addition, this should have to be renewed every like 5 or 10 years with your DLM a fire engine driver in OC/LA in CA, and there are too many drivers, Garden Grove and DTLA, that don't know to pull over and just stop, or try and make their turn before we catch up. Car accidents are the leading fatality for a reason. Secret to old life like Japan? Better driving habits and rules. This has been tried, but the organizations like AARP are very powerful and shoot down this type of legislation. I'd rather see mass adoption of autonomous vehicles that would give the elderly the freedom of transportation without the need for driving. I believe they would self-police themselves to autonomous vehicles over driving themselves. Perhaps this would be best applied to the overall population. They should make everyone take driver's ed classes every 10 years. It's ridiculous to think someone who passed driver's ed even 20 years ago knows all the new traffic laws and car technology. My father-in-law had some muscular degeneration for a few years before he passed away. He couldn't physically lift his feet to walk, and sitting wasn't much better. He ran a stop sign and almost hit another car and a pedestrian with my wife in the car because he couldn't move his foot from the gas to the brake fast enough. She took his license out of his wallet and threw it in the fire when they got home. He was pissed for a long time, because in his head he was perfectly able to drive, and didn't even recall his near accident. Who knows how often that actually happened when we weren't around? 70 seems a little young these days. I have a neighbor that I fish with at least once a week. He drives his truck, towing a bass boat, without issue, and he's 71 or maybe 72. Of course, maybe he's the exception. But I can see a test for people of a certain age. I'm just not sure what age I'd make the law. Maybe 75? My chick's 86-year-old grandmother drives, but she keeps it to daytime hours during clear weather and stays within about a 5-mile radius in our small town. Grocery store, pharmacy, post office, doctor appointments/vet visits, etc. She's not had an accident, but I could understand a driving test for her. Really though, her understanding her limitations keeps things safe for her and others. It's such an individual scenario, but I guess we'd have to draw a line somewhere.